Success is about adding more skills, more hours, more hustle, more pressure. But what if the real reason 2026 doesn't change your life isn't because you lack something, but because you're carrying too much? Too many habits that drain you, too many beliefs that shrink you, too many voices that confuse you. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Success doesn't come closer when you chase it. It comes closer when you remove what's blocking it. This speech is not about motivation, it's about subtraction, because the people who change their lives in 2026 won't be the ones who do more. They'll be the ones brave enough to remove 4 things that quietly sabotage their future. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why one of these removals feels terrifying but unlocks everything. Most people don't fail because they are incapable, untalented, or unlucky. They fail because they are crowded. Their lives are full but not fulfilled, full of opinions that aren't theirs, full of expectations they never agreed to, full of silent rules about how they should behave, what they should want, and who they should become. And in that crowded space, something important gets lost: their own voice. The need for approval rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't walk into your life and demand attention. It slips in quietly. It disguises itself as being polite, responsible, respectful, realistic. It whispers instead of shouts. It asks questions that sound reasonable, even wise. Will they understand? Will they judge me? What if they don't support me? What if this disappoints them? What if this changes how they see me? And because these questions feel harmless, we answer them without realizing the cost. At first, the cost seems small. You delay a decision, you soften an opinion, you stay quiet when something matters to you. You choose the safer path because it creates less friction. You tell yourself you'll do the real thing later, when the timing is better, when people are more supportive, when you feel more confident. But later becomes a habit, and that habit slowly shapes your life, decision by decision. You stop choosing what matters and start choosing what feels safe. Not what is meaningful, but what is acceptable. Not what is aligned, but what is approved. And over time, you don't even notice the shift. You just feel tired, confused, stuck. You look busy, but you don't feel alive. You look responsible, but you don't feel fulfilled. And you wonder why success feels close enough to see, but too far to touch. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's simple. Success has a problem with safety. Growth has a problem with approval. Because every meaningful step forward requires disappointing someone. There is no version of a bold, purposeful life that keeps everyone comfortable. There is no version of progress that doesn't challenge expectations. If you want to build something real in 2026, something that reflects who you truly are, you must accept one unavoidable reality. Not everyone will understand, agree, or applaud. And that's not a flaw in the system. That is the system. The need for constant approval keeps you reacting instead of leading. You begin to scan the room before you act. You measure your choices by how they will be received rather than why they matter. You ask for permission from people who are not responsible for the consequences of your life. People who will not live with the regret if you stay small. People who will not carry the weight of your unrealized potential. Think about how often you delay action, not because you don't know what to do, but because you're worried about how it will look. How often you adjust your dreams so they sound more reasonable. How often you explain yourself before anyone asks, just in case. That is not humility. That is fear wearing a polite mask. Approval is expensive. It costs time, energy, and courage. It costs momentum. It costs clarity. And most dangerously, it costs identity. When you constantly seek approval, you slowly outsource your self-worth. You teach yourself that your value depends on how others respond. And once that belief takes root, it becomes difficult to take risks because every risk feels like a vote on your worth as a person. This is why talented people stay invisible. This is why capable people underperform. This is why intelligent people play small. Not because they lack ability, but because they are trying to succeed without making anyone uncomfortable. And that is a contradiction. Because growth, by its nature, disrupts comfort. In 2026, success moves closer the moment you stop asking for permission from people who aren't living your life. Not because you become careless or arrogant, but because you become honest. Honest about what you want. Honest about what matters. Honest about the fact that your life is yours to live, not theirs to approve. This doesn't mean you stop listening. It means you stop obeying every voice equally. Wisdom is knowing which voices deserve weight and which ones deserve distance. Feedback from people who are building, learning, and growing is valuable. Approval from people who are projecting their fears is not. You don't need to rebel against everyone. You just need to stop letting everyone vote. There is a quiet confidence that appears when you remove the need for constant approval. You move differently, you speak more clearly, you decide faster, you stop explaining every choice. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care about the right thing. Your alignment, your integrity, your long-term vision. And here's the paradox: the moment you stop trying to be liked by everyone, you become more respected by the right people. The moment you stop chasing approval, you start attracting trust. Because people can sense when someone is grounded, when someone is not performing but standing, when someone is not seeking validation but direction. You were never meant to be approved by everyone. You were meant to be affected. You were meant to contribute. You were meant to build something that reflects who you are, not who others expect you to be. And that requires courage. Not loud courage, quiet courage, the courage to disappoint, The courage to be misunderstood, the courage to choose growth over comfort. Approval feels good in the short term. It gives you relief, it reduces tension. But relief is not progress. Comfort is not fulfillment. And safety is not success. The life you want in 2026 is on the other side of a few uncomfortable moments where you choose yourself without asking for permission. Because the real tragedy is not that some people won't support you. The real tragedy is spending your life supported, applauded, and accepted while never becoming who you were capable of being. Being busy is easy. Almost anyone can do it. You can wake up early, fill your calendar, answer messages, attend meetings, check tasks off a list, and collapse at the end of the day feeling exhausted. And exhaustion feels like proof. It feels like you earned something. It feels like progress. But being effective is rare because effectiveness requires clarity, and clarity demands honesty. And honesty is uncomfortable. You can fill every hour of your day and still be standing in the same place next year. The schedule changes, the tasks change, the pressure increases, but the outcome stays the same. Not because you didn't work hard, but because you worked in circles. This is the quiet trap of busy work. It creates motion without meaning. It keeps you occupied without moving you forward. The reason is simple, but difficult to accept. Movement is not progress. You can move all day and go nowhere. Noise is not impact. Just because something is loud, urgent, or visible doesn't mean it matters. And effort is not direction. You can put enormous energy into the wrong thing and still end up far from where you want to be. Yet most people never stop to question this because business gives them something powerful, an excuse. Busy work feels good because it avoids discomfort. It allows you to say, I'm trying without asking, is this working? It avoids risk because truly meaningful work requires commitment, exposure, and the possibility of failure. Busy work lets you stay in motion while avoiding the one thing that could change everything, choosing a direction. It also avoids truth. Truth asks hard questions. Truth asks you to look at your habits and admit that some of what you do is theater. It looks productive from the outside, but it protects you from the inside. It keeps you from facing the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Busy work fills that gap with activity, so you don't have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, or worse, knowing exactly what needs to be done and avoiding it. Real progress asks harder questions, and most people are too tired to ask them because they are busy answering easier ones. What actually moves the needle? What creates real leverage instead of temporary relief? What am I avoiding by staying busy? What matters most, not next? These questions don't have immediate answers, and that's why they're often ignored. They require thinking instead of reacting. They require stillness instead of speed. And stillness can feel terrifying in a world that equates motion with value. In many environments, business is rewarded. People praise long hours. They admire packed calendars. They equate stress with importance. But none of those things guarantee results. In fact, they often mask the absence of them. When everything is urgent, nothing is important. When everything matters, nothing gets finished. And when you're constantly reacting, you never get the chance to design. Busy work thrives in confusion. When goals are unclear, activity becomes the substitute. When priorities are fuzzy, effort becomes the measurement. You start doing what's visible instead of what's valuable. You focus on what can be checked off instead of what compounds over time. And because the feedback is immediate, you keep going even when it's taking you nowhere. There is also fear hiding beneath busy work. Fear of choosing the wrong thing, fear of committing to one path and letting others go, fear of being judged for focusing on something that might not work. So instead, you do everything a little and nothing fully. You spread your energy thin and call it balance, when in reality it's avoidance. Focus, on the other hand, feels risky. Focus means saying no. It means disappointing expectations. It means accepting that some things will be left undone. It forces you to confront trade-offs, and trade-offs make choices visible, and visible choices invite accountability. Busy work protects you from that. Focus exposes you to it. In 2026, success won't reward exhaustion. It will reward clarity. It will reward people who can identify the small number of actions that create disproportionate results and have the courage to ignore the rest. It will reward those who can sit with uncertainty long enough to choose deliberately instead of reactively. Focus begins when you remove everything that looks important but leads nowhere. That removal is not dramatic. It's quiet. It happens in your calendar, in your task list, in your habits. It happens when you ask, before saying yes, does this move me closer to what actually matters? And when the answer is no, you resist the temptation to stay busy just to feel useful. This is not about doing less for the sake of comfort. It's about doing less so that what remains can actually work. It's about creating space for deep work instead of shallow motion. Space for thinking instead of constant responding. Space for strategy instead of endless execution. When you remove busy work, something interesting happens. At first, there is discomfort, a strange sense of emptiness. The familiar rush of urgency fades, and you're left with silence. But that silence is not a problem. It's an opportunity. It's where insight lives. It's where priorities sharpen. It's where real direction becomes visible. The people who make the greatest progress are not the ones who do the most. They are the ones who do the right things consistently. They understand that effectiveness is not about how much energy you spend, but where you spend it. They understand that time is not their scarcest resource, attention is. If you want 2026 to be different, you don't need a fuller schedule. You need a clearer one. You don't need more tasks. You need better questions. And you don't need to prove how hard you're working. You need to ensure that your work is actually working. Because at the end of the year, effort will not be what matters. Direction will. And removing busy work is the first step toward choosing it. Some people call it being realistic. They say they are just being honest with themselves, just keeping their feet on the ground, just avoiding disappointment. It sounds mature. It sounds responsible. It sounds wise. But listen closely to the language they use with themselves, and you'll notice a pattern that has nothing to do with truth and everything to do with fear. The voice in your head doesn't usually scream. It repeats quietly, constantly. You're late, you're not ready. Others are ahead. You should have figured this out by now. You missed your chance. These thoughts don't arrive as insults. They arrive as facts. And because they feel familiar, you accept them without question. But that's not realism. That's conditioning. You did not choose that voice. You inherited it. It was shaped by past failures that hurt more than you expected, by criticism that landed before you had the tools to defend yourself, by environments where being cautious was rewarded and standing out was punished. Over time, your mind learned a strategy: keep expectations low, stay alert for danger. Don't get too hopeful, not because it wants you to fail, but because it wants to keep you safe. The problem is that safety and growth do not want the same things. Negative self-disguise as realism keeps you operating from the past. It judges today's possibilities using yesterday's experiences. It assumes that because something didn't work before, it won't work now. It tells you that other people are ahead without telling you that they started earlier, had different resources, or faced different obstacles. It creates comparisons without context and conclusions without evidence. And here's the danger. You will never outperform the story you believe about yourself. You will not rise beyond the ceiling your inner narrative sets. If your internal voice constantly frames you as behind, unprepared, or lacking, your actions will unconsciously align with that identity. You will hesitate when you should move. You will play small when you should stretch. You will choose comfort over growth and call it wisdom. This is how potential goes unused. Not through dramatic failure, but through quiet self-sabotage. You talk yourself out of opportunities before they even appear. You don't apply because you assume you won't be chosen. You don't start because you assume you're not ready. You don't commit because you assume you'll disappoint yourself again. And each time you listen to that voice, it grows stronger, not because it's right, but because it's rehearsed. The mind believes what it hears repeatedly. And when it hears doubt long enough, it begins to treat it as identity. In 2026, success comes closer when you remove the internal narrative that keeps you small in the name of staying safe. This does not mean replacing it with empty positivity or pretending everything will work out. It means questioning the assumptions behind the voice. It means asking, is this actually true, or is this familiar? Is this based on evidence, or is this based on fear? Is this helping me grow or helping me hide? There's a difference between being honest and being harsh. Honesty looks at reality and asks what can be improved. Harshness looks at reality and declares a verdict on your worth. Realism acknowledges obstacles without turning them into identity. Conditioning turns temporary setbacks into permanent labels. Growth requires belief before proof. This is uncomfortable for people who want certainty first. Proof feels safe. Proof feels rational. But proof only comes after action, and action requires belief. Not belief that you will succeed effortlessly, but belief that you are capable of learning, adapting, and becoming more than you are today. Without that belief, you will wait forever for confidence to arrive, not realizing that confidence is built through movement, not thought. Negative self-talk keeps you stuck in a loop where you demand perfection before permission. You tell yourself you'll act when you feel ready, when you feel confident, when you feel sure. But readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. And confidence is not a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. When you stop attacking yourself for not being perfect yet, something shifts. You create room for progress instead of punishment. You allow yourself to be a beginner again. You treat mistakes as information instead of evidence of inadequacy. And that changes how you show up. You take more initiative. You recover faster. You try again instead of retreating. This doesn't mean ignoring weaknesses. It means addressing them without contempt. It means recognizing gaps without turning them into identity. You can say, I have work to do, without saying, I am behind as a person. You can say, others are further along, without saying, I don't belong. The difference between those two statements is the difference between growth and stagnation. The most limiting beliefs are not the loud ones, they are the reasonable ones. The ones that sound like common sense. The ones that keep you inside the lines while life passes by outside them. They are dangerous precisely because they feel responsible. But responsibility is not self-attack. Discipline is not self-rejection. And realism is not self-erasure. When you remove negative self-talk disguised as realism, you don't become naive, you become available. Available to opportunities you would have dismissed. Available to effort you would have avoided. Available to a future you would have assumed was not for you. The voice in your head does not have to be silenced. It has to be trained. It has to learn a new language, one that challenges without condemning, one that corrects without crushing, one that tells the truth without stealing hope, because the goal is not to believe you are perfect. The goal is to believe you are capable of becoming. And that belief, once removed from the shadow of self-attack, creates a level of momentum that no amount of realism ever could. We live in a world addicted to speed. Everything around us is designed to make us feel late, behind, and pressured. Notifications demand immediate attention. Compad lines feel constant. Everyone wants results now, validation now, success now. And slowly, without realizing it, urgency becomes the default setting of our lives. We move faster, decide quicker, and react more often, believing that speed itself is progress. But urgency is not the same as importance, and confusing the two is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make. Urgency creates panic. Panic narrows thinking. When you feel rushed, your brain shifts into survival mode. It stops asking long-term questions and starts looking for short-term relief. It asks, how do I stop this feeling right now? How do I reduce pressure? How do I escape discomfort? And in that state, decisions are no longer strategic, they are reactive. Panic creates poor decisions. You say yes when you should say no. You commit before you're ready. You choose what is fastest instead of what is correct. You act to relieve anxiety, not to build something meaningful. And those decisions, while they may reduce pressure in the moment, quietly shape a future you did not intend to create. Poor decisions create regret. Not dramatic regret at first, but subtle regret. The kind that shows up as a feeling that something is off, that you're busy but misaligned, that you're moving but not advancing, that you're achieving things that don't actually fulfill you. Regret accumulates not from one big mistake, but from hundreds of rushed choices made under pressure. The most successful people are not the fastest movers. They are the calmest thinkers. They understand something that urgency hides speed amplifies direction. If your direction is wrong, moving faster only takes you further away from where you want to be. Calm creates space to see clearly. Calm allows you to weigh trade-offs. Calm gives you the ability to choose deliberately instead of instinctively. This does not mean they are slow or passive. It means they are intentional. They move with rhythm instead of rush. They understand when to act quickly and when to pause. They do not let external pressure dictate internal decisions. And because of that, their progress compounds instead of collapsing. Urgency often disguises itself as ambition. It tells you that if you slow down, you'll miss out. If you don't act now, someone else will take your place. If you don't decide immediately, the opportunity will disappear. But most opportunities that require panic to capture are not opportunities at all. They are traps. Real opportunities can withstand thought. They improve with clarity. When everything feels urgent, nothing receives the depth it deserves. Relationships become transactional, work becomes mechanical, goals become shallow. You stop designing your life and start reacting to it. Days blur together, filled with activity but lacking intention. And over time, the cost is not just burnout, it's misdirection. In 2026, success moves closer when you stop reacting and start responding. Reacting is automatic, it is driven by emotion, pressure, and habit. Responding is intentional, it is driven by values, priorities, and long-term vision. The difference between the two is not time, it is awareness. When you replace pressure with patience, you reclaim control. Patience is not waiting passively, it is active restraint. It is the discipline to pause long enough to ask better questions. What actually matters here? What are the second-order consequences of this choice? Will this decision still make sense 6 months from now? These questions cannot be answered in a panic. They require calm. When you trade rush for rhythm, your life begins to stabilize. Rhythm creates sustainability. It allows effort and recovery to coexist. It acknowledges that progress happens in cycles, not sprints. Rush ignores limits. Rhythm respects them. And people who respect their limits make better decisions because they are not constantly operating from depletion. Urgency often feels productive because it creates visible action. Something is happening, something is moving. But visible action is not the same as meaningful progress. Many people mistake intensity for effectiveness. They confuse stress with significance. They believe that if they are not overwhelmed, they are not trying hard enough. But overwhelm is not a badge of honor. It is often a warning sign. Calm decision-making does not mean the absence of pressure. Pressure will always exist. Deadlines are real, stakes are real. What changes is how you relate to them. Instead of letting pressure hijack your thinking, you use it as information. Instead of letting urgency dictate your pace, you choose it intentionally. The ability to slow down is not weakness. It is leverage. It allows you to see patterns instead of reacting to events. It allows you to align actions with values. It allows you to invest energy where it compounds rather than where it disappears. Lasting success is built by people who can slow down long enough to choose correctly. They understand that one well-made decision can outperform 100 rushed ones. They understand that momentum built on panic is fragile, but momentum built on clarity is resilient. They understand that speed without direction creates noise, but clarity creates power. When you remove urgency that creates panic, you create space for wisdom. You create room for perspective. You allow yourself to think beyond the immediate moment and into the future you are shaping. And in that space, better choices emerge. Choices that may take longer up front, but save years on the back end. The world will continue to rush. It will continue to demand immediate responses and instant results. That pressure is not going away, but your relationship with it can change. And when it does, you stop being pushed by time and start using it. Because the people who truly move ahead are not the ones who run the fastest. They are the ones who know when to slow down, breathe, and choose the direction that actually leads somewhere. Adding feels hopeful. It feels like progress. It feels like momentum. When you add something to your life, a new habit, a new goal, a new plan, a new commitment, it gives you the sense that you are moving forward. Addition promises possibility. It gives the ego something to point to and say, I'm improving, I'm becoming more. That's why addition is celebrated. It's visible, it's exciting, it feels constructive. Removing feels very different. Removing feels like loss, it feels like giving something up. It feels like stepping backward before you can move forward. There is no immediate reward in removal, no applause, no visible proof that you are progressing. In fact, from the outside, it can look like you are doing less, not more. And that makes removal uncomfortable, especially in a world that measures worth by activity. Addition feeds the ego because it reinforces identity. When you add, you get to keep who you are and simply stack more on top, more roles, more responsibilities, more labels. You can say, this is who I am plus more. Removal challenges identity because it asks a harder question. Who are you without this? Who are you when this is gone? What remains when you strip away the things you've been hiding behind? This is why removal is so threatening. When you remove something, you face silence. The noise that once filled your time, your mind, and your emotions fades. And in that silence, there is space. Space to think. Space to feel, space to notice what has been neglected, space to confront choices you've been avoiding. Silence removes distractions, and without distractions, responsibility appears. Responsibility is heavy. It means you can no longer blame lack of time, lack of opportunity, or lack of resources. When something unnecessary is removed, what remains becomes visible. Your priorities, your discipline, your fears, your intentions. Removal exposes what addition can hide. That is why most people avoid it. They keep adding goals instead of subtracting distractions. They add tools instead of removing habits. They add plans instead of removing misalignment. It feels safer to pile on than to let go. As long as life is crowded, you don't have to look too closely at what actually matters. But the space you create through removal is not empty. It is intentional. It is where clarity lives. Clarity does not arrive in chaos. It does not speak over noise. It emerges in the quiet moments where you can finally hear yourself think. When the unnecessary is gone, the essential becomes obvious. What remains stands out with sharpness and urgency. Removal also demands trust. Trust that letting go will not leave you behind. Trust that doing less can lead to more. Trust that space will be filled with something better, not something worse. This trust is difficult because there is often a gap between removal and reward. Addition gives instant gratification. Removal requires patience. In that gap, doubt shows up. You wonder if you made the right decision. You feel the urge to replace what you removed with anything else just to avoid the discomfort of emptiness. But emptiness is not failure. It is transition. It is the space between what no longer serves you and what is trying to merge. When you remove something that once defined you, even if it was unhealthy or misaligned, there is a sense of grief. You are not just letting go of a habit or a commitment. You are letting go of a version of yourself. And that version, no matter how limiting, once helped you survive. Honoring that fact without clinging to it is part of growth. Addition allows you to avoid this emotional work. Removal forces you to do it. It asks you to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate not knowing exactly what comes next, to resist the urge to immediately fill the space. And this is why removal requires more courage than addition. It is an act of faith, not just effort. In 2026, the people who win won't look busier. They won't brag about how full their calendars are or how exhausted they feel. They will look lighter, not careless, but unburdened. Not idle, but intentional. Their energy will be directed, not scattered. Their focus will be sharp, not diluted. Lightness does not come from avoiding responsibility. It comes from choosing the right responsibilities. It comes from letting go of what drains you without moving you forward. It comes from releasing commitments that were made out of fear, expectation, or habit rather than purpose. When you remove what is unnecessary, your decisions improve, your attention deepens, your energy stabilizes, you stop reacting and start choosing, you stop maintaining and start building. And because you are no longer carrying excess weight, progress becomes sustainable. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from removal. When you know what you have let go of, you become more grounded in what you keep. You are less easily pulled in every direction. You say no without guilt. You protect your time without apology. You understand that every yes carries a cost, and you choose carefully. Addition is easy to explain. Removal often isn't. People may not understand why you step back, slow down, or simplified. But understanding is not required for alignment. Approval is not required for clarity. The work is internal, not performative. The paradox is that by removing more, you create room for better additions later. Not out of desperation, but out of intention. Not to fill a void, but to build something aligned. Removal sharpens discernment. It teaches you the difference between what is attractive and what is essential. The future is not built by accumulating endlessly. It is built by refining, by editing, by choosing. And those choices are rarely about what to add next. They are about what you are finally willing to let go of so that what truly matters can take its place. Everything you keep costs you something. Not just the obvious things, but the quiet ones too. Every habit has a price. Every belief carries a weight. Every commitment, even the ones you once loved, demands energy, attention, and time. Most people never stop to calculate that cost because the payment is rarely due all at once. It's spread out, subtle and easy to ignore. We tend to ask the wrong question. We ask, is this good or bad? Is this healthy or unhealthy? Is this right or wrong? But life is rarely that simple. Many things in your life are not bad enough to force change, yet not good enough to move you forward. They sit in the middle, comfortable and familiar, slowly draining you without creating urgency. The real question is not whether something is good or bad, The real question is, what is this costing me long term? What is the opportunity cost of holding on? What am I not doing, not becoming, not building because this is taking up space in my life? These costs don't show up on a daily basis. They show up in years. A habit that consumes an hour a day doesn't feel dangerous. An hour feels small. But over a year, it becomes hundreds of hours. Over a decade, it becomes thousands. And it's not just the time that's lost, it's the momentum, the skill that was never developed, the relationship that was never deepened, the idea that was never pursued because attention was always elsewhere. Beliefs have invisible costs as well. A belief that tells you to play it safe may protect you from short-term discomfort, but it may cost you long-term growth. A belief that tells you it's too late may save you from the risk of trying, but it may cost you the possibility of becoming something more. These beliefs often feel like wisdom. They feel responsible. But when examined closely, they are often fear translated into logic. Commitments are perhaps the most expensive things we hold on to, especially outdated ones. A commitment made in a different season of your life can quietly become a burden in the next. You keep showing up not because it still matters, but because you once said yes. And each time you honor that old commitment, you spend energy that could have been invested elsewhere. Energy is finite. Every place you spend it is a place you cannot spend it again. Comfort hides cost. Something can feel familiar, even soothing, while slowly limiting your future. Comfort doesn't announce itself as a problem. It whispers reassurance. It tells you that there's no need to rush, no need to question, no need to change, and because nothing feels wrong, nothing gets addressed. But stagnation rarely feels painful in the beginning. It feels calm, it feels stable, it feels safe. The pain shows up later when you realize how long you've been standing still. When you look back and see that the reason progress was slow was not because you lacked effort, but because you were investing it in the wrong places. Success comes closer when you start measuring costs instead of comfort. Comfort asks, how does this feel right now? Cost asks, what does this create over time? Comfort focuses on the present moment. Cost focuses on the future trajectory. One leads to relief, the other leads to growth. Measuring cost requires honesty. It requires you to look at your life as a system, not a collection of isolated choices. A habit is not just a habit. It's a vote for the type of person you are becoming. A belief is not just a thought. It's a filter through which you interpret possibility. A commitment is not just an obligation. It's a direction. When you start measuring cost, you notice things you once ignored. You notice how certain routines drain you even though they look harmless. You notice how certain relationships consume emotional energy without providing support or growth. You notice how certain goals no longer excite you, yet still demand effort. And noticing is the beginning of change. There is resistance here because letting go feels risky. Holding on feels known. Even when something is limiting, it is predictable. The future cost is abstract, but the present comfort is tangible. That imbalance keeps people stuck. They trade long-term possibility for short-term ease without realizing they are making a trade at all. The invisible cost of holding on is that it narrows your options. It quietly determines what you have time for, what you have energy for, and what you believe is possible. Over time, those constraints harden into a life that feels smaller than it could be. Not because of one bad choice, but because of many unexamined ones. When you begin to measure cost, decisions change. You become more selective. You stop asking whether something is manageable and start asking whether it is meaningful. You stop asking whether you can fit it in and start asking what it will push out. This shift doesn't make life easier in the short term, but it makes it clearer. Clarity brings its own form of relief. When you know what something costs, you can choose it consciously or release it without guilt. Guilt comes from confusion, from not knowing why you feel drained or dissatisfied. When you see the cost clearly, you regain agency. You are no longer stuck in vague frustration. You are making informed choices. Not everything that costs you something should be removed. Some costs are worth paying. Growth itself has a cost. Discipline has a cost. Responsibility has a cost. The difference is intention. When you choose costs that align with your values, they feel like investment. When you carry costs out of habit, they feel like weight. Most people are not held back by obvious problems. They are held back by invisible costs. They never stop to measure habits that seemed harmless, beliefs that felt practical, commitments that once made sense. And year by year, those things shape a future that feels heavier than it needs to be. When you shift from measuring comfort to measuring costs, success stops feeling distant. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because your energy is finally aligned. You are no longer leaking time, attention, and belief into things that do not serve where you are going. And that alignment is what allows progress to compound. Success is not attracted to desperation. Desperation repels it. When you move from panic, need, or urgency, your actions become scattered. You chase too many things at once. You say yes to opportunities that don't align. You confuse motion with direction and hope that effort alone will make up for lack of clarity. But success does not respond to chaos. It responds to alignment. Alignment is quiet. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't rush. It shows up in consistency, in coherence, in the sense that your life is moving in one direction instead of 10. When your actions match your values, you no longer feel divided. When your time matches your goals, your days stop feeling wasted. When your environment matches your future, progress becomes natural instead of forced. Clarity is magnetic because it simplifies decisions. When you are clear about what matters, distractions lose their power. Opportunities that once felt tempting no longer pull you off course. You stop reacting to everything and start responding to what fits. People trust clarity. They feel it in how you speak, how you decide, how you commit. Clarity creates confidence, not because you know everything, but because you know what you are aiming for. Chaos, on the other hand, creates friction. When your priorities are unclear, every choice feels heavy. You overthink small decisions because nothing is anchored. You exhaust yourself trying to keep options open, not realizing that openness without direction is just noise. Chaos drains energy because it forces you to renegotiate your values every day. Many people believe they need more motivation. What they actually need is less confusion. Motivation comes and goes. Clarity stays. Motivation can push you forward for a moment. Clarity pulls you forward consistently. It gives you a reason to say no without guilt and a reason to say yes without hesitation. Clarity does not mean certainty. You don't need to know every step. You need to know the direction. When direction is clear, even uncertainty feels manageable. When direction is unclear, even simple tasks feel overwhelming. This is why people with clear purpose often appear calm under pressure. They are not less stressed because life is easier. They are less stressed because decisions are simpler. Success is attracted to alignment because alignment creates momentum. When your actions reinforce your values, you build trust with yourself. When your time reflects your priorities, your effort compounds. When your environment supports your goals, discipline becomes easier. You are no longer fighting your surroundings. You are working with them. Unnecessary weight blocks clarity. That weight comes in many forms: commitments that no longer matter, habits that drain focus, beliefs that limit possibility, relationships that create noise instead of support. Each one adds friction. Each one pulls you slightly off course. Individually, they seem manageable. Together, they create chaos. Removing unnecessary weight is not about minimalism for its own sake. It is about alignment. It is about asking whether something supports the direction you are moving in or distracts from it. When the unnecessary is removed, what remains becomes obvious. Priorities sharpen. Decisions speed up, not because you rush, but because you no longer hesitate. Clarity also changes how others respond to you. People are drawn to those who know what they stand for. Opportunities align more easily because your direction is visible. This is not luck. It is signal. When your life sends a clear signal, the right people, ideas, and opportunities can find you. When your signal is noisy, everything gets lost. Chaos often feels like opportunity. Many options, many paths, many possibilities. But without clarity, possibility becomes paralysis. You spend so much time evaluating that you never commit. Clarity reduces options but increases impact. It narrows the field so your energy can go deeper instead of wider. When your time matches your goals, your calendar becomes a strategy instead of a to-do list. You stop filling days with activity and start designing them around impact. Time becomes intentional. You protect it, you invest it. And because time is aligned with purpose, effort feels meaningful rather than draining. When your environment matches your future, behavior changes naturally. Your surroundings influence your choices more than your intentions. A chaotic environment reinforces chaotic thinking. An aligned environment reinforces aligned action. When you design your environment to support where you are going, you reduce friction. You make the right actions easier and the wrong ones harder. Clarity is not something you find, it is something you create. You create it by removing what does not belong. You create it by making decisions that reflect your values. You create it by choosing direction over distraction. This process is ongoing. Clarity deepens as alignment strengthens. Desperation wants immediate results. Alignment builds lasting progress. Desperation chases. Alignment attracts. When you are aligned, you don't need to force outcomes. You focus on what you can control. Your actions become consistent. Your message becomes clear. And over time, success moves toward you, not because you are chasing it harder, but because your life finally makes sense. Clarity does not make the journey effortless. It makes it coherent. And coherence is what allows effort to compound instead of cancel itself out. When unnecessary weight is removed, what remains is not emptiness, it is direction. And direction is what success has always been looking for. 2026 will not reward everyone equally. It never has. Time does not distribute results based on effort alone, nor does it respond to intention without action. It rewards alignment, it rewards clarity, it rewards the quiet courage of people who were willing to let go of what no longer served them, even when holding on felt safer. Most people will enter 2026 carrying the same weight they carried before, the same habits, the same fears, the same beliefs, the same excuses just dressed up in new language. They will hope that a new year brings a new outcome without requiring a new choice. And they will be disappointed, not because they lack potential, but because they refuse to release what was holding them back. The people who move forward will not be louder or busier. They will be braver. They will choose courage over comfort. Comfort whispers that staying the same is acceptable. Courage asks whether staying the same is costing you your future. Comfort tells you that it's safer not to risk disappointment. Courage reminds you that the greatest disappointment is living below your capacity. Clarity will always outperform chaos. Chaos feels active, but it scatters energy. Clarity feels simple, but it concentrates power. When you are clear about what matters, decisions become easier. You no longer negotiate with every distraction. You no longer feel pulled in every direction. You move forward with intention instead of urgency, and that changes everything. Purpose must come before pressure. Pressure pushes you to act quickly. Purpose pulls you to act meaningfully. Pressure creates motion. Purpose creates direction. When you allow pressure to lead, your life becomes reactive. When purpose leads, your life becomes designed. The difference is not how hard you work, but why you work. You don't need a new life. You don't need to reinvent yourself or escape your circumstances. You need a lighter one. A life with fewer distractions, fewer obligations, fewer beliefs that tell you who you are allowed to be. A lighter life gives you room to think, to choose to grow. It creates space for what actually matters. Removing what no longer serves you is not an act of loss. It is an act of respect. Respect for your time, respect for your energy, respect for your future. Every habit you release, every belief you question, every commitment you outgrow creates room for something better to take its place. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. When you remove weight, movement becomes easier. Progress feels less forced. You stop pushing uphill with unnecessary load. You begin to notice how much of your struggle was not the journey itself, but what you insisted on carrying with you. Letting go does not make you weaker. It makes you more effective.